again, and welcome to Austin's American Flyer YouTube video page. Today I thought I'd invite you to join me on a journey of restoration. Before us are a couple pieces of a flyer track that are, well, in dismal shape. As you can see, there's a lot of rust, not only the ties but the rails on all sides. So the plan today is to experiment with a process that I've heard of others using that takes regular tap water and mixes with it some vinegar. For those of you that remember, vinegar is acidic, and so in theory that will gently remove the rust from the rail. What I'm curious to know about is what happens to the insulators, because those are cardboard. So thought we'd try it, and we'll check back in a day or two and see what has happened. Stay tuned. So here is two pieces of track that have been in the vinegar water tank, if you will, for 2 days. This first piece, as you can see, is pretty cleaned up. I did run some sandpaper, wet dry sandpaper, across the rails just to remove the dust, and then wiped it down. But there was still some more rust, so I put it back in. But I thought we could, I could do that again and see if I can get it completely cleaned off. And while I'm rubbing and talking, I also wanted to point out the ties and how the ties have lost their color. I don't know if you can see that, how well you can see this, but they're silver instead of black. So I guess that's one downside to the vinegar water combination. I don't know how I'm going to get those black, aside from I can either take everything off, which I don't really want to mess with, or I can spray paint it all, and then I've got paint to take off. But as you can see, hopefully, this is actually, the tops of the rails are cleaning off pretty good. Pretty happy with that. The sides here, though, another issue altogether. But I've got an idea, and so I'm going to try that idea here in a little bit. I wanted to look at this piece. So this piece is just absolutely terrible. And as you can see here, it is just very rust covered. Again, I'm going to try the wet dry, just real lightly, trying to see if I can get much of the rust to come loose. I'm going to take a rag here, wipe across that. Well, that's really interesting. It is beginning to come clean. So there again would be proof that if you want to use this vinegar and water combination, you will get some results. In the case of this piece of track, though, there's still quite a ways to go, and the sides of the track, the outside rails are not too bad, but the insides are just awful. So again, got an idea on what to do about that. So we'll give that a whirl here in just a second. So about this point, I realized that anyone who's still watching this probably is either got a touch of OCD or are the kind of personalities that just must see things through the end. And there's probably a vast majority of you that are ready to turn this off, or maybe already have. So I decided to take advantage of speeding up video and put everything up several notches to about 400%. But what I did is I put a metal attachment on my Dremel tool, or multi-purpose tool, and went along the rails, and it did a great job of lifting loose the rust that was now really hardly clinging on. It was very easily to remove it. But as indicated before, the downside is that the black of the ties was also gone. So the rust was gone, but so so were all the other colors. I decided to also just check myself and take another piece of track that was somewhat rusty and just use a little bit of elbow grease to see how clean can I get this. The attachment on the Dremel tool here is a type of Scotch-Brite. So it's a very soft but very lightly abrasive attachment for the multi-tool. And as you can see, it does a nice job of removing the rust. And what is pleasant to see is underneath the rusty ties, it's quite shiny. And so it did a good job of cleaning up the rails. And I did then eventually switch to a different type of attachment. And this is a metal, I believe it's steel, but it could be brass because I have one of each. But either brass or steel wire attachment. And I've found that this particular attachment works very, very nicely for burnishing the pickup wheels on tenders and lighted cars. So I usually use this as a second or final step. Then after cleaning up that one piece of track, I went back to the track that had been soaking and decided to see if I could clean it up a little better, which it did clean up quite nicely. And that's what I'm doing here. I do believe one comment I made is that health and safety warning that our friends across the pond like to say, but when using a multi-tool that has a bit on the end with small wire fibers, it's very important to wear eye protection, because those fibers, or I should say those wires, do fly off in all kinds of direction. They also tend to throw bits of dirt and rust and everything around. So I found myself getting fairly covered during the course of this cleaning. So what I'm pointing out here is that while the rail sides ties are nicely cleaned, I did discover that there is some abrasion on the rails. Okay, fast forwarding here, I picked up some chemical that blackens metal. And while I'm not completely sure what this track is made of, I figured there was some nickel involved, and that's one of the types of metal that this chemical blackens. So here you saw me take some of the chemical, apply it to a tie, and again it did start to turn colors. Now while it was wet, it had sort of a black sheen, but if you look closely you can see there's some other colors mixed in. After it dried, however, it kind of went back to this. Certainly not shiny, and while my lining is not the greatest, it's also not very black. It's some sort of a dark tan with some hints of green and blue in it. So not knowing what else to do, I decided to coat it again, and I went ahead and coated the rest of the track and then let it dry and came back. And when I came back, I found out that voila, the blackening had actually rusted. So anyhow, I decided that that was kind of an epic failure. Alright, so now here we are seeing once again, this is the piece of track that was really eaten up by rust. The rust had caused a lot of divots and small indentations, not only the ties but on the top of the rail. And I determined that if anyone, including myself, were to use a track in that condition, it would quickly attract a lot of carbon buildup. It would clean tires as you ran trains over it, but the track would get dirty after just a few passes. So I thought I need to somehow smooth that out. So I tried wet dry sandpaper, and that didn't work. And so then I tried 150 grit and went to that for a while, and then I actually put a grinding wheel on my Dremel and started that way, and then went back to wet dry sandpaper. Then I decided to try polishing these ties that I had used the blackening agent on, and after a little more deliberation decided, you know what, I'm going to take everything apart. I took the rust off yet again. This time this was rust due to the blackening agent. I put a rust treatment spray on everything. And then once that had set for about an hour and a half, I came back and hit it with some dull black. And as you can see, it turned out pretty well. This is the end result. Thanks a lot for tuning in to Austin's American Flyer. And if you have any comments, feel free to share those. And if you stuck through to the end, my hat's off to you. Thank you so much, and enjoy your trains.